Let's do some Q&A. This is fun.
Okay.
I like it.
Something, I know we chatted about this before, but the whole is pain in certain body areas genetic? so I told you with me, I have problems in my back, and I'm like, hey, my dad has problems in his back, my brother has problems in his back. We must have a genetic problem.
Genetic back problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking with other pain areas, I'm sure you've heard it before, knees, hips, other places. Mm-hmm. So I would just like to open the can of worms and see what you think about all of that. Feel free to get into as much as you want.
All right. Genetics. Genetics is the greatest scapegoat in our world.
Just because we don't know what else is happening.
Because we don't know, and so there's a black box, right? Most people look at their body and there's a black box. They don't know what's happening in the black box, and then they try to make sense of it by seeing what's not in the black box, which is my mom had a bad back, and now I have a bad back. Right. So those two things must be linked, but they didn't actually open it up and go, oh, there's a lot more inside that box than I ever thought. And so why do you have a bad back and why does your dad have a bad back?
Yes.
Well, the thing is, everybody has bad backs. And so you are not unique in that you and your father had a bad back. Culturally, everybody has bad backs. Yeah. And the reason for that is because it's culturally driven. And so we talked about this a little bit earlier. Culturally, we are prone to glute atrophy.
Right.
Okay. We are prone to ankle instability and atrophy. We're prone to our ankles and big toes not moving enough.
Yes.
Okay. So here's the thing. You and your dad both sat in a chair a lot, right? You and your dad both wore shoes.
Yep.
Okay. That cramped your feet and distorted the way that your feet work so that your feet look more like shoes than they do feet, right? And so you've lost arch stability, you've lost ankle stability, you've lost glute function. All of those things transfer load up into the low back.
Right.
And so you had a low back problem, right? In reality, you had a big toe, arch, ankle, and hip problem that just transferred load to your low back. Problems aren't where symptoms occur. The reason that the back is the problem is because that's where the load is landing.
Right.
Okay, and so it's not that you and your dad both had a bad low back, it's that culturally we all have bad low backs because we spend time sitting. We shape our feet to look more like shoes than feet. And so everybody ends up with a bad low back. The same way everybody ends up with knee replacements. It's a cultural phenomenon, not a genetic phenomenon.
So that's the kind of myth buster of that idea. And you could point it, I almost wonder if you should either repeat that or show it. But it's just to reiterate again, it's the low back is, if it's screaming at me in pain, it's not necessarily that's the thing, that's the problem. And you've talked about that before too. It's
the area of pain is it's never where the problem actually is. So the pain itself is not the problem. It is your body's fire alarm system telling you that there is a problem somewhere. Okay. The area of pain, say the low back, is not the problem. That's where load is landing. Okay. But dysfunction elsewhere is shoving load and compensation into the low back. So the real problem is occurring at the hips, at the knees, at the ankles, at the feet, at the big toes. Those are problems. The low back is the victim. Most people come in and they say, oh, well, I have a low back problem, and we have to break that to pieces and go, okay, you have low back pain, you have dysfunctional joints below that the low back is resting upon, okay? So for you, your hips were subluxed. You had a dislocated SI joint. So where your hip connected to your spine was actually dislocated out of place. This is super common, and what happens is you get a nervous system reaction and muscle spasm in the low back because it's trying to stabilize your hips, but that's a hip problem, that's not a low back problem. So that's just one thing, okay? Unstable SI joint because of atrophied glutes,
Yeah, you were telling me about that too. I want you to explain that because atrophied glutes meant, you mentioned it, that it didn't keep the hips
Stable.
right. Okay. So
Okay.
and that's what the glutes are there to do.
The
Which I
glutes are
didn't
meant
know.
to stabilize the pelvis, okay, and propel the body forward. And so when we walk, our pelvis, our belt line should remain level to the floor. But when our glutes atrophy, we get this sort of like what people call like a model walk where their hips are swaying back and forth, right? Biomechanically, that's an absolute disaster. What's happening is when that pelvis drops,
Yeah, what happens
when that
there?
pelvis drops, this muscle up here is getting put on a stretch, and then it's holding on for dear life trying to stabilize this pelvis, but the problem is over here. So a weak glute on this side creates a low back problem on this side because this side is compensating and trying to do the work of this glute, but it's 1/8 size. It's tiny compared to this big glute muscle. There's no way it can stand up to that load.
Interesting.
Okay, because the pelvis wants to hold the body wants to hold the pelvis level.
Okay.
And so if it can't hold the pelvis level from this attachment,
Yep.
which is where it should be, it's going to try to hold it level from
there.
this attachment.
Holy smokes.
So people go, oh, I just have a
Wait.
chronically tight low back. And so they go to their massage therapist, and their massage therapist just rips into their low back, trying to release the low back. It's not a low back problem. Chronic tightnesses always have their roots in chronic weaknesses elsewhere.
Every time?
Every time.
One more time. Okay. One more time.
Hit me with it.
So if this is atrophied,
Yep.
this doesn't have the ability to keep it in place. So this is taking over? Mm-hmm. I don't understand. Why is that?
So when this muscle applies contraction, force, okay, see what happens? It's pulling this side up.
Right?
Okay?
Yep.
Now, erase that. What happens when this contracts? It pulls this side up.
Up, right?
They both serve the same function, and so if the primary muscle isn't doing its job, the secondary muscle is going to have to try to do it.
I get it now. Okay.
And
So
that's a
this-
disaster.
That's insane. So this is trying to tighten to level out the atrophied muscle here.
So wherever there is a chronically
interesting.
tight area, ignore it, go and find the chronically weak area, fix that, and then the chronically tight area dissolves and dissipates and relaxes all on its own. Same thing with the neck, same thing with the tennis elbow, same thing with the hips and the growing.
Go through that. Do you have an example of the neck doing the opposite thing?
It's so the neck.
Or elbow, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, the neck's a good one. So your shoulder blades, okay, your scapula, should sit upright. They should point up toward the ceiling. Okay? Look at where, so this is my shoulder blade, the top of it, okay, and the bottom of it is right there.
Yep.
Okay, so bottom, top, where's it pointed?
Up. Yeah.
Up. Okay. Relax, put your hands down by your sides. Thank you for doing this. Yours are pointed this way. Okay? So why does that matter?
Yeah.
Okay? When this muscle under here gets weak, called your serratus anterior, that muscle is responsible for holding your shoulder blade upright. When that muscle gets weak, this muscle gets tight, and so our trap starts doing all the work of shoulder blade stabilization instead of sharing it with your rotator cuff, your mid-back, and your serratus anterior muscle.
How is this taking more load? Muscle-wise.
Because so the scapula stabilizers, think of all joints work within systems.
Okay.
Okay, so the traps, okay, your neck muscles, all right, your rotator cuff, the muscles that do that,
Right.
okay, your rotator cuff, your rhomboids, and your serratus anterior muscle, all are responsible for stabilizing and controlling your scapula. Okay, so they all share the same job.
Interesting.
Okay, Now, if this atrophies, and this atrophies, what now has to do 4 people's jobs rather than 1 person's job?
Just that.
The neck muscles. And so every time you press, every time you pull, every time you reach, instead of having 4 muscles that are doing the job of scapula stabilization, you have 1 muscle that's doing everything, and it's just all up in your traps all the time, and everybody has a tight neck, and everybody goes to the massage therapist, and everybody buys a Theragun, and everybody puts Icy Hot on it, everybody takes ibuprofen, but nobody's actually looking at the real problem, which is that 1 muscle is doing the work of 3 different muscles that are just checked out. They're completely atrophied.
So back to the question of the, like, sometimes you mentioned not going after the tight muscle, but going after the atrophy muscle. How do you identify, so this would be my tight muscle, how do you go after the other parts to loosen?
Yeah, it's walking through the baby steps. The baby steps work every single time. So it's deactivate. Okay. So we're going to deactivate these tight muscles, static back, deload, take the weight of your head off. Okay. Then we'll go through and mobilize, shut this area down, shut this area down.
Deactivation, can you give like one exercise that is connected to that?
Static back.
And that's laying on the ground?
Legs up in the air, chin tucked, just relaxing and doing deep breathing.
For?
20 minutes.
20 minutes, yeah.
Yep.
Cool. And then?
Then you go into mobilizations, massage, active stretching, static stretching for pecs, traps. Okay, open it up so that we can restore position back. Then you go in and you activate these atrophied muscles, external rotator cuff, scapular retractors, serratus anterior, which is a scapula protractor. Okay, so you go in and very specifically target these atrophied muscles, get them firing again. That holds your shoulder blades upright, and now the work is now shared by 4 muscles rather than all done by 1.
And that's where you finally get relief.
And that's when you get relief for the neck.
That's crazy. And just to be super obvious, I mean, that's what you guys do here.
Yep.
That journey.
Yep.
Yeah. Is there anything else to touch on with the whole genetic,
yeah, I mean,
misconception?
Yeah, it's a huge misconception. Okay. If there is any really knowledgeable people out there, they might raise their hand, and this will be the one objection.
Okay, go.
Okay. Your annular wall of your disc, so the disc between your vertebrae, okay, you have vertebrae disc, there's the marshmallowy thing in the middle. The wall, the annular wall of that, it has a genetic component. Okay? So some people have a genetic marker that they will have a thinner annular wall, which makes them more prone to degenerative disc disease. Okay? Here's why that doesn't matter. Because I'm arguing with myself now.
Hey, you're not arguing with me. You're not arguing with me because
here's why that doesn't matter. 80% of the people 55 and up are walking around with degenerative disc disease and 0 pain. Yes. Completely asymptomatic. And so degeneration is only loosely correlated to pain because structure and pain signals are 2 completely different systems. One is in the bones and the cartilage and the muscles. One is in the nervous system. And those 2 things will touch each other, but they are 2 distinct systems. That's a whole nother conversation.
I know. I'm like, do we get into it right now? Do we get into it right now?
You do not have to fix all of your structural problems in order to get out of pain. You just don't. You can calm your nervous system, decrease your body's sense that there is a threat, and get out of pain, because all the research has shown that you can have structural damage, and we all do, we're all walking around with it. We can have structural damage and be completely pain-free, because pain exists in the nervous system, in the brain and the peripheral nervous system, and our interpretation of that issue. Okay, but it is not a direct response to that issue. You do not have to fix structural issues in order to get out of pain. There are some certain structural problems that have high correlations to pain, in which case it makes sense to have surgery. Severe bone-on-bone knees that are now unstable. Severe spinal stenosis where you're impinging on your spinal cord. Those are no-brainers. Go get surgery on that, clear that up. But the myth that structural changes, structural degeneration is what's causing my pain is completely broken. There's no causal relationship with there. It is loosely correlated at best.
That's crazy. Just to be super obvious about the other side, so what are some common, or what are places people are, mentioning they have pain that can be resolved through just the nervous system? I know that'll be obvious to you, but like just for people.
I mean, you're talking about like what structural degeneration?
No, I'm saying like what are things people are coming in for that they're like, this can be, you could be pain free just by fixing, kind of calming the nervous system. Mm-hmm. Like what types of?
Every single joint issue on the human body. Feet pain, ankle pain, knee pain, back pain. Honestly, the biggest ones are centralized spine pain. Neck, mid-back, low back. Centralized spine pain, meaning it's not radiculopathy going down the arm or radiculopathy going down the leg, but centralized pain near your spine is the most complex condition with the most multifactorial conditions, and so having surgery on those is an absolute nightmare because the surgeon has no idea what's actually causing your pain. So they're just like flipping a coin going, is this gonna work or is this not gonna work? There's good surgeons out there who have good filters to make decisions through. It's not that all surgeons are clueless, that they're super smart. But a lot of them will turn people away and go, there's nothing that I can personally do for you. You need to go chase down other avenues. And that looks like fixing the biomechanical problems, calming your nervous system, reducing inflammation with eating good food, drinking, getting hydrated, all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.